How did Vincenzo Nibali, a man with no sprint and not even the best punch, win Milano-San Remo in 2018? This is another edition of the Lanterne Rouge Italian Race Throwback Series. Hope you're enjoying it so far. Milano-San Remo parkour doesn't change. Cipressa, Poggio, then the descent and 2.7 k's of flat into the finish on the Via Roma. Here it was rainy conditions in 2018 at the start, but not like 2013 Chile misery. That was really cold. We got Sagan trying to win again, thwarted by Kwiatkowski in the year before. We got Bahrain Merida here with Colbrelli as the on-paper leader, but also Vincenzo Nibali. They got Hauser as well, who was robbed by Cavendish and Sanremo back in the day. Franco Pellizotti, I think he was a DS there now. Anyway, the race was actually pretty straightforward. Polar opposite to this year. Cipressa was controlled, Capomeli controlled, FDJ looking to keep Demar in good position, who won in 2014. The hitters we got here, Sagan, Kwiatkowski, Michael Matthews, Alaphilippe, who would win the next year. But this is pre-Pog Van Aert MVDP era, back when races were raced a bit more predictably, and so over the Cipressa nothing really happened. The biggest drama was actually Cavendish before the Poggio, crashing badly into some road furniture when he was on Dimension Data, which was some more bad luck for him in this period in his career. But going into the Poggio, we have this year's winner, Matej Mohoric, going in first wheel as domestique for Colbrelli, and maybe Nibali or Puccio, Van Baarle for Ineos, Skinny Sky, whatever they were called then. Matthews in good position, but notably, Sagan was fine. Quickstep were not, and Alaphilippe would not attack on the Poggio this year. They were actually very deep. You don't actually want to be 20. If you intend to attack, 25th, 30th wheel ain't the place to be if it's let out at a pretty good pace. Marcus Burkhardt, I don't know if it was supposed to be an attack or if he was trying to just make the race harder on the Poggio for Sagan. He's on Bora Hansgrohe, and Bora here brought a pretty rouleur-focused squad. I think they just signed Formolo. They didn't bring him. I don't know if he's available or not. He'd done Tirreno. But it's always interesting to me that the point of this race, the real where the race is made, won or lost, is on the steeper sections of the Poggio often, and that's often where the big rouleurs actually can't be that helpful. And this was actually not the polar opposite as well to the 2021 edition, where Ganna just drilled it really hard. The pace actually really came out of the race on the Poggio because no one was willing to take it up. Jempi Drucker for BMC bridges across to Burkhardt after Mohoric, who didn't see Burkhardt as a threat, just sort of let his wheel go. And there's no quick step doing a lead out trying to launch Alaphilippe. They got Viviani in the team. Sagan's kind of just perched at the front of the race behind Nibali. Drucker goes across to Burkhardt's wheel and then will eventually attack him. But as you can see, steady pace. Happy days for Demar on FDJ, for Caleb Ewan on Mitchelton Scott. And as I said, it was a different era where there were less, the balance was more with the strong teams wanting a sprinter to win. It was really just Quickstep wanting to launch Alaphilippe, and Bora, I'm not sure what their plan was with Sagan, to be honest. It's not like now UAE, Jumbo, Visma and co all trying to launch a rider on Poggio. But here you see the cost of bad position. Nederlands, who was on Israel Cycling Academy, incredibly talented rider. This was back in 2018, and impressive to go and be able to get a gap on the Poggio. It takes him 10 seconds, oh, maybe over 10 seconds, full pretty much sprinting, to draw level with Nibali to even get to the front of the race. That's the cost of bad position. So you're doing your peak 10-second power just trying to get to the front of the race. Whereas Nibali, who's acting here as a defensive role for Colbrelli, he's just going with a dangerous move to maybe sit on it, and then if he works with it, it puts pressure on the others. Bahrain looking back, blocking at the front, they're not pacing. No quick step, no Bora to the front, no Mitchelton Scott or FDJ controlling either, so it's a bit of chaos at the front on the Poggio. The pace, as I said, has come out of the group. Just by being in better position into the base of the Poggio, Nibali has a huge advantage in terms of how tired he is compared to Nederlands right here. Takes a pull, and then he's going to flick Nederlands to do another one, and then his plan is basically to attack him. And there's no concerted chase in the peloton still at this point. So Nibali gets his gap, riding primarily as a sort of defender for Colbrelli, and it's already 6 seconds as Enrico Battaglin is attacking. It was just the perfect move, perfect tactics by Nibali, by Bahrain. Whether they drew it up that way or whether it was just a spur-of-the-moment thing, I'm not sure. He then attacks Nederlands after he finishes his pull to go clear, wanting to do this descent solo. And we're getting close to the crest of the Poggio, and we've seen no Julian Alaphilippe attack. Sagan's on the back foot with Burkhardt having gone up the road, then obviously brought back, and now he's got a string of riders, including Nibali up the road, with Hausler and Colbrelli sitting on his wheel and marking it. DSM, or Sunweb at the time, don't have a domestique for Matthews. Kwiatkowski had no domestique. Ineos, or Sky rather, didn't. They had Moscon and Van Baarle. They didn't really do anything for Kwiatkowski on the climb either, or pace. They weren't able to. And if you've already got that 6-second plus gap, the favourites don't want to close that, because if one of them does it, that's basically going to cost them their race on the Poggio. It's so shallow. The draft is so important. Eventually, Os comes to the front for Peter Sagan and Bora Hansgrohe. He's going to pace the rest of the Poggio in the first, probably third of this descent, with the group still pretty large. Demar in it as well, so if you're Bora, you're like, geez, are we really going to pace Arnaud Demar, who's in really good shape, to the finish? But here's the descent coming up off the Poggio, which Mohoric, I think, set the record for. We'll do a quick timing check. At the top of the descent, around here, I'll be off by a few microseconds or whatever, milliseconds. Through that corner, Nibali was 11 seconds ahead of the chasing group. And of course, he was very strong, probably did incredible, great 5-minute or 3-minute burst on the Poggio, but that 11 seconds as Os enters the corner here was also hugely down to the lack of cohesion in the group behind, the lack of domestiques, Bora not having Os at the front to pace, or Kwiatkowski having a domestique. And also, never forget, Bahrain being in good position at the base of the Poggio. If you enter the base of the Poggio in good position, the world is your oyster. If you have good legs, you should be able to take advantage of that. If you have good legs and you're behind it, you might not be able to use them because you might burn them just getting to the front like Neylands. We saw in the Milano-San Remo this year, when it was a smaller group entering the Poggio, that Roglic entered in bad position, and I think that cost him his race and put Jumbo, Visma and Wout under a lot of pressure when Pogacar attacked early. But here's the descent. Nibali did not have a moto in front of him. Very different to Mohoric this year. Mohoric, obviously, incredible descent, took a lot of risks, nearly crashed multiple times. Nibali doesn't actually, not that I saw, and then they missed a few hairpins, doesn't really push it to where you're like, oh, he's about to crash. It actually looks pretty controlled, which is the beautiful thing about Nibali descending, is that he just looks so in control despite going so fast. According to Mihai Kazgufausto, so copy GOAT on Twitter, Mohoric was like 13 seconds quicker than Nibali on this descent. As Trentin attacks from the group, who's on Mitchelton Scott. This is the most curious part of this edition when I watched it back, and I didn't remember this part. I don't know if Ewan was in that group descending. He's certainly not far behind coming back, because the Poggio wasn't too hard for the sprinters compared to, say, 17 or 19 when the big puncheurs attack. He attacks, you see the size of the group, Ewan's on the back, and that is going to cost Ewan, I think, this race. Sagan actually loses the gap, kind of like Van Aert and Van der Poel lost the gap of Mohoric on the descent. And when a guy's going full, there is a huge energy cost for Sagan to keep chasing full gas, not in the draft of Trentin and with other guys in his draft. We'll get back to Trentin in a second, but yes, I think the moto definitely helped Mohoric, particularly getting the gap initially, the slingshot. You can see it in the overhead. I'll probably do a video separately on it before Milano-San Remo next year. But the dropper post probably helped as well. He's a little bit heavier than Nibali, and he pushed it right to the limit. So that was an incredible descent, slightly different than the Nibali one, who had already taken his 11-second gap over the top of the Poggio. But here Sagan actually stops chasing Trentin. And this is why, okay, if Trentin had gone clear and he'd come second, then this doesn't cost Caleb Ewan the race, because the group was never making it back to Nibali anyway. But Trentin's going to be caught, and there's so much dilly-dallying at the base of the Poggio descent, which we see often every year when there's a lone escapee, and Nibali only ends up winning by a second or half a second, that I think Trentin not being at the front of the race when they hit the base of the Poggio was a big mistake by him, and yeah, I think cost Ewan. Here's Nibali on the hoods, not even in the drops. Don't even think he has an aero helmet on, although we will analyze that slightly odd helmet in a second. He's reaching the end of the Poggio descent. He's got 2.7 Ks of flat on the Via Roma to finish, and the gap has actually come down a little bit to he and Sagan. It's at this point, timing it, again, I could be off by a little bit, with the heavier Sagan, who's been on the front, pushing it on this descent in the super tuck, now illegal position. The gap is now actually 8 seconds. So the gap that Nibali took over the top of the Poggio when no one reacted to he and Neyland's move was key for him in this race. But that would not have been enough were it not for this moment right here All the favourites at the front, Kwiatkowski, Matthews, Sagan. Demara's just out of picture. Colbrelli is obviously sitting in with Nibali up the road. No domestiques go to the front to pace. Trentin is up the road. I think Ewan's in the group. I think he's somewhere in there. It's a pretty large group. Trentin's here chasing Nibali, is never able to bridge across to him. If Trentin was there to pull for Ewan, woulda, shoulda, coulda, would have been a different race. But that's the beauty of this race. It can be won by Nibali, who's not a sprinter, doesn't have a sprint really of any repute, doesn't have the best punch either. He's done well in Liège early in his career, but not at this point in his career. I don't think he had a fantastic punch. But he's a brilliant descender, brilliant timing, reads the race really well. And what is this helmet? Is this like a Lo Squalo shark helmet? Like, is that supposed to be a shark fin, like as a gimmick, or is it actually like an aero design? And as I said, we should see the gap, in theory, come down so quickly on the Via Roma, on the flat section, but it often doesn't happen the way you'd think mathematically, with the advantage that the peloton should have behind, because where are the domestiques? They might have been dropped on the Poggio. They're trying to make their way up after the Poggio fast descent. That takes some time. Maybe they don't have domestiques. Maybe they're looking at Ewan and Demara in the group. Some teams like Bora with Sagan thinking, I don't want to pull them to the line, so we're not going to help chase Nibali back either. And so before the last 500 meters, they hadn't really put much time into Nibali at all. It was only when Quickstep came to the front with Julian Alaphilippe trying to lead out Viviani that they put a couple of seconds in, but it's still around 5 seconds going into the last 500 meters, despite the gap being only 8 seconds at the base of the Poggio descent. This man, what you doing, man? Only Tim Pot YouTubers living in microstates allowed to take video for the races. What are you going to use that for? Vai Nibali, bang, see you later. Phone's gone, probably destroyed. Nibali doesn't care. And another thing I also wondered from this race, Nibali didn't seem to super tuck, but he obviously has in the past in his career, but he did puppy paws, or the illegal position with his hands on the front a lot, which often helps lone escapees who don't have the benefit of any draft. Did that make a difference to him winning? But last 300 meters, the gap looks pretty set. Viviani's going to get a lead out. It's also Ewan on the left-hand side is going to try and close down Nibali, Mark Cavendish style, when he pipped Hausler at the line back in the day, but the gap was too much. Vincenzo Nibali, the incredible solo on the Poggio when no one reacted, takes in front of the sprinters, Ewan chasing La Grandissima Milano-San Remo 2018 for an ecstatic Tifosi there in San Remo. I think it's a tactic where teams actually have a fast guy like Colbrelli and a puncher or an attacker or a good descender like Nibali that they could try and employ in future editions. I think we could see something like this again, particularly if you want to put riders like Van der Poel, Alaphilippe and co under pressure. Nibali took it ahead of Ewan, Demar, Kristoff, Roland, Sagan, Matthews, Magnus Cort, Colbrelli and Jasper Stuyven. Hope you enjoyed this video. As always, let me know which Italian races you'd like to see a throwback video of next since 2014. I'm really enjoying going back and doing them. It reminds me of when the channel was started a few years ago, so I'm loving it. I'll see you with the next one. Ciao.